I'm Gregor Thompson, I'm a philosopher and a writer, and I know what the meaning of life is. Welcome to The Struggle. This episode is brought to you by The Struggle newsletter. This is a weekly email newsletter in which I send out for free every Sunday a short article concerning the art of embracing struggle. If you feel restricted in life, if something is holding you back, perhaps it's time to struggle your way towards freedom. If you're trying to be productive, you're trying to be healthy and to achieve your dreams, perhaps you're chasing the wrong thing. A lot of us believe that we should be aiming for happiness, but this is an unwise pursuit as happiness comes and goes without any control from us. However, there is a way to be more fulfilled with life, and that is to embrace struggle, to exercise, to eat healthily, to have uncomfortable conversations, to take career risks, to discover who you are, and to be autonomous. That's the way to break free from whatever it is that's restricting you. And that's why I created a newsletter. Along with the article, I also provide tips, strategies, and recommendations such as movies, music, podcasts, and recipes to help along the way. To sign up for free, go to gregorthompson.com. The link will be in the show notes. Confirm your subscription and make sure you check your spam folder for your welcome newsletter and add me to your contacts to continue to receive it in your inbox every week for free. And that's it. You're on your way to struggling more and being more productive, healthy, and motivated. Now, let's get on with the struggle. This is episode 35 of The Struggle with me, Gregor Thompson. And after a month-long break, I'm back. So this week I thought I'd just talk about why I took a break, the lessons I took away from it, and why dopamine detoxing may be a wise move for some. So, I decided to take a month-long break for a few reasons. One, I realised that for years, and especially this year, I'd been adding more and more work onto my plate and was increasingly feeling like I was rushing about to squeeze all of the work I had to do out of the day. The problem being that the time in a day remains the same, but the pressure and work increases. The second reason is that I forgot how to relax. I was working so hard for most of the day, and then when it was time to unwind, my brain just couldn't sit still. It was craving more dopamine, so I'd just mindlessly scroll through social media, pornography, or shopping sites because it was a constant need for dopamine, for what's next rather than relaxing in the moment. And the last reason I took a break was to reevaluate what was most important to me and to set priorities for what's the best use of my time whilst figuring out how to relax. Now, let me tell you, for the first half of the month, it did not feel like I was working any less. I still had this feeling gnawing away at my psyche that I had more to do, more work to do, more productivity to manage. But something clicked after the first 2 weeks with the help of my therapist. I realised that I was living solely in the future. I didn't feel worthy in the present, so had to make my future self better, which meant that any time the dopamine diminished and I was back to baseline and trying to relax, it was unbearable. My brain needed a distraction from the self. The self on its own in the present wasn't enough, so it either wanted to feel accomplished and proud after working hard, or it wanted a distraction when I wasn't working hard. So I knew I had to learn to just sit with myself, relax, and know that it is safe to do so, it's useful, and it doesn't make me a failure. Now, I should explain, dopamine detox is taking a break from anything that spikes your dopamine in unhealthy ways, anything that spikes your dopamine without much effort, so that could be like social media, pornography, video games, anything that spikes it, anything that's artificial, that really spikes your dopamine without any effort from you. For me, I took a break from social media and the majority of the productive things I do throughout the day. So I was still exercising, but I wasn't writing to-do lists, and I wasn't recording the podcast, I wasn't writing, I wasn't editing or anything like that. It was just to bring myself back to baseline, back to a healthier sense of self where I could just be by myself without any distraction. So here are the lessons that I learned after taking a month-long break with a slight dopamine detox. 1. Time is the most valuable resource. You cannot buy time. You certainly can buy yourself more time on the planet by being healthy, but you cannot outrun death and the impermanence of life. So pay attention. You could die tomorrow. Your loved ones could die tomorrow. You must be explicitly aware of the impermanence of your life and the impermanence of whatever else you value most, because nothing lasts forever. You will experience grief. Someone you love will die. And the impermanence of that relationship is what makes it meaningful. It doesn't have to be depressing to be aware of death. So feel every feeling and love those you love dearly. Don't distract yourself from feelings, either sad or happy. These feelings are more meaningful than the next productivity hack. The more aware you are of that throughout the day, the more you'll naturally want to experience life more, love those you love more, and cherish the meaningfulness of your life. Number 2, stop chronically living in the future. A lot of people on social media, the productivity gurus, growth mindset teachers, and extremely disciplined motivational speakers, a lot of the time are telling you to live in the future. Of course, they don't do this explicitly, but they tell you to get up early so your future self gets more done. They tell you to exercise every day so you feel better later, or so you're fitter and healthier later. They tell you to grind now, work ridiculously long hours to achieve greatness in the future. The fundamental issue with this is the implication that you are not worthy now unless you grind yourself into an exhausted mess. The implication is that you could be better. That's certainly true, but the implication shouldn't be you aren't enough now, and that you must earn your right to relax or even to be loved. Now, I'm all for doing all of these things, but not at the chronic expense of the present. I'm not willing to sacrifice the meaningful and great life I have now for a better one later. I am willing to sacrifice some of it, but not all of it. One thing I realized over the last month is that I have been perpetually grinding and punishing my present self for a better future self, forgetting to pay attention to what it's all for and forgetting to pay attention to what's most meaningful. Because my future is not what's most meaningful. My present is. It's the only thing that's real. Working hard is certainly useful, but you need to balance that working for the future with being in the moment. Lesson 3. In order to balance appreciating the present and working for the future, we must balance our day between dopaminergic activities and serotonergic activities. Let me explain. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter responsible for movement and motivation. It's our brain's way of telling us what behaviors to partake in order to survive. It makes us feel good when we exercise, eat healthily, have sex, and it makes us feel good when we're productive. As much as these behaviors are healthy, dopamine can work against us if we overload our brains with it, as I've been doing. When we spend every waking hour partaking in activities and behaviors that produce dopamine, like exercising, ice bathing, writing, recording, editing, tidying, washing, preparing, and planning, when we inevitably have to stop to relax or sleep, we experience a drop in mood because our dopamine levels have dropped, so our brains then attempt to produce more dopamine as fast as possible by overloading our brains with behaviors and activities that produce a lot of dopamine without much effort. Social media, drugs, pornography, gambling, shopping. So we're then in danger of becoming addicted not to any particular behavior, but addicted to dopamine itself, forgetting to live in the present. We spend our days partaking in behaviors and activities that benefit our future selves and produce dopamine through effort, and then forget how to live in the present, and so partake in problematic behaviors and activities that feel like they're bringing us back to the present, but are actually distracting ourselves from it. So the answer I found is the dopamine detox. Now, I know those two words are controversial, and the evidence proving its validity is mixed. However, I do believe that the only way to learn how to bring yourself back to the present and learn how to be present in healthy ways is to, at the very least, reduce the time you spend chasing dopamine and learning some serotonergic activities instead. Serotonin is also a neurotransmitter, but is referred to as one of the here and now chemicals by Daniel Lieberman and Michael E. Long in their amazing book, The Molecule of More. Serotonin is produced when we feel present. It's produced alongside chemicals like oxytocin and endorphins when we feel gratitude, appreciation, love, and joy. The way I took a break from dopamine was by halting the podcast and newsletter for a month and refraining from social media, all social media. I still exercised, but the rest of the day I spent trying to just be present, by myself, within myself, feeling emotions, and acting on what I truly wanted to do in that moment rather than what I believed would benefit my future self. I was basically relearning how to relax, how to watch television without being distracted, how to sit for 15 minutes by myself without distracting myself. Remarkably, it has worked. I now don't feel guilty for resting. I feel a hell of a lot less pressure to perform on all cylinders all of the time. I am more aware of the love others have for me regardless, and this is important, regardless of the work I do and how productive I am. And the last lesson concerns rules and routines. Rules and routines are certainly useful for those who are chronically unproductive, who struggle to get out of bed in the morning. For some, having rules like, every day I must make the bed. It makes it easier to be productive because after a while there's no decision to make, you're just following a rule. What you do next becomes unconscious. But what happens when this goes too far? Well, you'll end up living the majority of your time following rules without questioning whether or not they are helping rather than hindering. For instance, I had rules regarding this podcast. I had to record an episode every week, and I could never miss a week. That was the first 2 rules I created for myself in January when this podcast started. Then I told myself to post clips on social media every week as well. Then it became I must post a clip on every social media channel every single day. Then it became I must post a clip on every social media channel every single day and 2 clips every day on YouTube. The issue with these rules is you don't pay attention to the quality of the content, just to quantity. So I would edit 14 clips out of an episode that had 3 minutes of content left, and in those 3 minutes I knew I had some good content that would be great for a short or reel, but I was following a rule, so I didn't edit anymore. Or I would edit many clips that weren't useful for a 30-second clip, but I had to edit 14 clips every week. That was the rule. So the content suffered as a result. So rules and routines are useful, but it's also helpful to regularly reevaluate what rules and routines you're following for their validity and usefulness. Another example was my precious to-do lists. I've been writing to-do lists for well over a decade now, and I did the same thing with my to-do lists that I did with the podcast, increasing the expectations until they became normal before increasing them again. So it started out as a weekly to-do list. Then I added a habit tracker. Then I added a daily to-do list and then a monthly to-do list. And then I put so much pressure on myself to tick activities off that if I didn't read every day or write every day, I would feel like a failure at the end of the week when I was left with 6 ticks rather than 7. So after speaking with my therapist about this, I stopped writing the to-do list to see what would happen. And remarkably, again, I didn't feel any sort of loss. I wasn't obsessed with them like I thought I was, and the world didn't end when I stopped writing to-do lists. What did happen is most of what needed to be done was done, and the rest wasn't as important anymore. I did, however, forget a few things, so I started back up writing to-do lists, mainly to remember things I'd likely forget. But just like the dopamine and serotonin and the future self and present self, the answer is balance. I don't write a daily to-do list or a monthly to-do list. I just write reminders for myself. Or if I've got a particularly busy day, I'll perhaps schedule it so it's easier to follow. It's good to have routines and rules, but don't live by them 100%. Leave some room for spontaneity. Leave some time for unstructured rest where you just relax and switch off from all the routines or rules. Not because it's productive, but because you want to relax. So to sum up, be continually aware of the impermanence of life and appreciate the time you have left with those you love and this life you're living. Stop chronically living in the future and appreciate the present. Balance dopaminergic activities with serotonergic activities, and don't live your life in accordance with rules and routines. Leave some room for spontaneity and this crazy thing we call life. The answer lies in the struggle. So keep on struggling. Just a few more things before you take off. Firstly, thank you for watching. It genuinely means a lot to see people viewing and liking the content. Second, if you're enjoying the content, please subscribe and share. Those are the best ways you can support the podcast. As you can probably tell, I don't have a ton of fancy equipment. I don't have a team behind me helping with marketing or editing the podcast. I don't have much resources. So any help is greatly appreciated. You can also stay up to date with everything I'm doing on social media. All of the links will be in the show notes. And you can also listen to the Struggle podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And lastly, keep on struggling.